In the meantime, one morning, there were many, many planes that were heard, and people rushing out the doors and looking up were completely shocked. And, whoever heard of so many planes at one time? Anyway, that's all of Antwerp found out that the Germans had just penetrated Belgium, and the war had started. The Jews already were aware that the Germans wanted to own all of Europe, wanted to be the leaders, the conquerors, but they also knew that target number one would be the Jews. So after many meetings with one another and discussions and what went on, it was unbelievable. They all decided, 99% of the Jews in Belgium decided that the safest place would be France, would be to run away to France. France is much bigger, it's probably safer, Jew would not be recognized as easily, etc., etc., and that's what most Jews decided to do. So we decided, my father had discussed it with his brother, and one night, very, very late, with a minimum of luggage, my uncle and aunt and my two cousins, my father, my mother and I, we took a train, and hundreds of other Jews took the same train, and we all decided to go to France. When we arrived there, the French police was waiting for us. They had received orders that whoever entered Paris at that time, and that is where we were headed, that was our location, it was decided that we should all be put in temporary camps, that no harm will come to us, that it was just a transition, that after being there for 2 months, they would find places for us where to live. In other words, they couldn't send, 700-800 people in one town and 700 in another. So they said just temporary, nothing to worry about. It was all very simple. It was just a transition and not to worry about anything. Well, we stayed in that camp for about 4 months. And what I remember from that camp were wooden houses, very bare inside, just cots to sleep on. And then there was one huge dining room, cafeteria style, where everybody got a plate, a fork, and a knife and a spoon. And 3 times a day we would be given food. We'd all wait online and be served. The food, of course, was lousy, absolutely lousy. I remember being hungry the whole 4 months. It never seemed to be enough. And that must have scared my mother to death, since I never was a good eater before. That as far as that went, she couldn't believe it, how much I could eat. Many people helped one another at that time as far as food goes. One would exchange bread for this and potatoes for bread, whatever. There was a lot of camaraderie. And after being there for months, I know that my father tried desperately to escape. And he had told us, once he escapes, he'll be able to get us to help us escape somehow, but it just didn't work out. It was very, the security was tremendous. And one day after 3-4 months being there, we were told to all go on another train, not far away from there. It's going to be another camp, But there we'll only stay a very short time, because that's where the final decision will be on, where we'll all will be placed, in which towns or city or wherever, and that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. So all of us again went on a train, and we were sent to this second transition camp. They called it the transition camp. And that one was very similar to the first one, except that it was extremely dirty. And the only people who did any kind of work were the women. They were supposed to help with the cooking. I don't remember men working there at all. The people who were, all the Jews that were in the camp. I don't remember anyone working. I don't remember any schooling at all. And I don't remember anyone being, there was absolutely nothing to do all day. The filth was unreal. The reason I remember that so well is everybody, absolutely every person in that camp ended up with lice in their hair. And I remember the weirdest thing, where we were in a group, a big circle, and one person would try to get the lice out of the hair of the other person. It was like a chain. And that's all we'd be doing all day, is try to get all that lice out. It was itching to such extent, it was horrible. About 2 months passed, and finally one day, my father him and another guy had realized there's a way of escaping. So he told us not to worry, he's going to make it that night. And that as soon as he's out of there, he's going to get help and get us all out, meaning my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, my mother and I. And, okay, this was another separation. I felt absolutely awful. As much as I was told how important it was for him to escape so he could help us, it was horrible that he left us. I missed him. I must have felt very, very close to him at that period. Anyway, in the meantime, while we were there was one French policeman who fell in love with my mother, desperately in love. And he had his own quarters, and she spent a lot of time with him there. Of course, they became lovers. And he had told her that he could help her escape and me. And she said, you're going to help me, my daughter, but also my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and she said to him, all of us are now nobody. And he decided he would. We had not heard from my father. We didn't know if he made the escape or not. We just didn't know anything at that time about him. And this guy, being so in love with my mother, couldn't say no to her. So everything seems to happen late at night, but that's when it actually did happen. My uncle, my aunt, my mother, my cousins and I and him, we escaped. We made it one night. Now, he was so fantastic, this guy, this gendarme. He not only helped us escape, but he went with us to Marseille, south of France, and even found us quarters. The quarters where we could sleep, it was a huge basement, and we stayed there for about 3 days and 3 nights. And then he of course had returned immediately to his to the camp, to the transition camp. From there, my uncle, aunt, and cousins went on further south in a small village. We found out later on where they hid for the whole war, 4.5 years. My mother and I, on the other hand, we decided, well, she had decided that Paris would be much safer to hide. And the very fortunate part that we were never caught was that, as I said at the beginning, she had very, very dark black hair and green eyes. She didn't look Jewish at all. She, constantly did people think she was Spanish descent. And we arrived in Paris after many days of traveling, and we found a small room somewhere. We stayed there, I would say, about six months. That short period, all I can actually remember is that I'm not sure what she was doing all day, but I know I didn't go to school. I know I roamed around in the streets of Paris. I'd sneak into movie houses. I'd do all these stupid, crazy things. I would often have to steal food because I was constantly hungry. And since I was so on my own and there was no supervision, it was very simple. I remember that very often she would sleep late, and then I would go off on my own in the subways. That was my first adventure with the subways. I had never seen them before. And I would sneak in on those also. And I would ride from one end of Paris to the other. And in a way I had a wonderful time. I did not have any friends. She always used to tell me not to talk to anybody, not to know anybody, because they could tell on us. And we had to be extremely cautious. That whole period, I always had to do the shopping. She always sent me for bread, for fruits, for vegetables. And what I remember the most were the lines. The lines were endless. For one loaf of bread, one had to wait a half hour in line. It was absolutely horrible. Whatever one needed, one had to wait on lines. And one particular morning, she gave me some money to go shopping for food again, and she was in bed. And I just didn't feel like going. I resented it to no end. And I told her, why doesn't she go herself? And she completely lost her head. She became a raving maniac. She got up from the bed and she started to beat me up, to pinch me, to bite me. She didn't know where to get to me. It was absolutely horrible. She also yelled, and she told me never, never again to speak to her like that. That was my job, and that was all there is to it. So I had to, of course, I ended up going buying the bread. Till today, I have a phobia against waiting online, whether it's in a movie house or a restaurant or anything. I absolutely cannot stand waiting online. I always remember that period in France where all I did was wait on lines. It was absolutely horrible. I'm not sure what we were living on at that time. I'm not sure she was even working. I guess she was. But it wasn't a long period where we were together. But we didn't get along, I know that. I was so angry always to go shopping. I was very lonely. At times I was happy because I was so on my own and I saw a lot of movies, but it was such a unsure time. And she and I just never got along at all because of her demands on me were horrible. Now, of course, I can't even ask ask her today why. Why was I the one who had to do the shopping? Was it because she was working and couldn't do it? Why was I left alone so much? I just, there's no answers for the time being anyway. I just don't know.